Yes, you read that correctly. You should leave your hometown. In fact, not only your hometown, it might actually make sense for you to leave your home country. I lived at home my entire life from 0 till about age 18. I then moved to a bigger city for college for 3 years, spent 2 months in Mexico teaching English to local Mexican kids. I was literally the only white guy in the town. That was in my first year of college. And then in my second year of college, I actually spent 5 months in Asia. Not teaching kids, but backpacking. Going to college for 2 days a week and having a 5-day weekend literally every week. But when I graduated college, I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a job, didn't really have anything lined up. So naturally I moved back home, stayed there for a few months, and since then I haven't been back home for more than 2 weeks in a very, very long time. Now, quick caveat, I absolutely love seeing my family and I absolutely love seeing my home friends. This is not about getting away from them, it's about something else. You see, anytime I left home, whether it was going from my hometown into the bigger city for college, or going to Mexico, or going to Asia, every single time I came back feeling like I grew more than all of the people that didn't do what I just did. So out of my home friends that stayed at home and went to local colleges, I felt like I grew more than them. And when I went to Mexico specifically, that was the first time out of Europe for me ever. That experience was just so life-changing because I'm living with a Mexican family, I'm speaking Spanish all day, I literally started dreaming in Spanish, and I'm the only white guy in this entire town. Doing that for 2 months of your life at, I believe I was 19 at the time, obviously changes you a lot. So then coming back, I felt out of place. And when I went to Asia and spent 5 months and then came back to Ireland, again, I felt out of place. You see, from getting outside of your hometown, your home country, the growth you experience can't even be compared to the growth that you would have experienced if you just stayed in your hometown. Like, look at it this way, take 2 30-year-olds. One left his hometown at 20. He spent the last 10 years of his life in big cities, in different cultures, in countries where they speak different languages. He lived by himself, then he lived with a partner, then he lived with a group of friends. He's done a lot. Compare that to the person that stayed at home, lived with their parents until they were 30, because let's be honest, getting a house, if you're working, a 9-to-5 job nowadays is, for most people, almost impossible if you live in Ireland. Well, obviously, the amount that each of those two people have experienced, right? Life experiences, new things they've done, they don't compare. And you see, now is the time to do it. Are you going to go travel the world when you're 30? Maybe. Are you going to do all the things that you wanted to do when you've got kids and maybe you're settled down? Maybe. But imagine you did them when you were still young, while you're still developing, while you're still becoming the person that you're going to become. You see, I've made so much more money by leaving my hometown and leaving my home country. I left my home country in 2020 for good, meaning I still go back to visit a couple times a year, but that's it. And I did this for a few key reasons. The first and probably biggest reason as to why I left Ireland was the taxes. You hear about all these big companies, right? Like Google coming to Ireland, setting up their headquarters and getting all the tax benefits. But that's because they're big companies. You see, if you're not a massive company, and in fact, you're an individual, you're a person, then the tax you're going to pay in Ireland, if you have goals of making a lot of money, is going to be absolutely astronomical. So in my case, I set up a company in 2020, and literally, I'd say about a month after setting up the company, I was like, that was the worst thing I ever did, because the business was growing. We were growing very fast. And so I started to do the maths. I started to realize, okay, well, if I start paying myself 5, 10K a month, 15K a month, I'm going to be paying a shit ton of tax. So of course, there's ways and means where you can lower that tax burden by just paying yourself a very low salary, then paying 12.5% corporation tax at the end of the year on the profits, and maybe reinvesting back into real estate or different things. There's ways to do it, but it's very complex. And for me, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be able to make a lot of money, keep a lot of money, and then spend it however I wanted. So in 2020, I left. Of course, I just set up the company, so I had to keep the company running, but I set myself up in a new country. Better tax system, just seemed like a better country to be based. That decision has probably made me a few $100,000. Not that I had to make extra money, but it literally just saved money that would have been paid as taxes. Instead of it all going to the government as taxes, I could keep most of it. But that's not the only reason I left Ireland. The second reason I left was the Irish drinking culture. Now look, I'm Irish. I love a drink. And there's a few times a year where I will go and have many, many drinks. But you see, in Ireland, it's a little like this. Most people have their first drink when they're like 12 or 13. I had my first proper can of alcohol at 12. Now, I'm not talking about seriously heavily drinking, but still, at 12, to have your first full can That's quite a lot. And then throughout your years, 13, 14, 15, 16, you spend a lot of your time going to a field with about 5 or 6 of your friends, a bag of cans between you. At that age, when you drink 6 cans by yourself at 15, you're not going to be in a good way. So there was so many times where we literally would spend a Saturday, go out at 1 p.m. in the day, sneak off, parents wouldn't know, get cans, one of our friends' older brother or sister who could get them, and then drink in a field, get sick, get a takeaway, go home and sleep it off, and nobody knew any different. And you see, that culture kind of continues. You see, when you get to college, most people in Ireland have done most of their drinking. They know what it's like to have a hangover after hangover. And so college is normally not as chaotic, but it's still a massive, massive part. And here's the problem. When I got to age 17, I realized that my entire ability to talk to people and socialize is pretty much based on getting drunk. I'm using drink as a vice. I'm using it as a way to become confident. And so realizing that, and also then being on this acne medication that pretty much told me I couldn't drink anyway, meant that I was forced into a situation where I was not going to drink. So for 3 years, I didn't drink any alcohol. From like 17, 18 to like 20, 21. And I did that because I literally realized that I need to learn how to be confident, how to socialize without this alcohol, which is a weird realization to have at 17. So that's problem one. The second problem with the Irish drinking culture is more so around the fact that, look, throughout the winter months, it's really depressing in Ireland. Like, it's dark all the time, it's raining, and it's just grim. So most people's way of dealing with that is working your job or studying, and then on the weekends, letting loose, all right? You go to the bar, you go to the pub, you go to the late bar, and then you go to the after party. And that becomes the weekend ritual because, let's be real, there's not much else to do. And it's your way of feeling happiness, right? But that just didn't align with the person I wanted to be. You see, I wanted to be the person that was making a lot of money, that was traveling the world, that was in a sunny climate, that was heavily into health and fitness, running marathons, being strong, doing all these things that just didn't really align with that. So I left. Reason number 3 as to why I left Ireland, and more specifically my hometown, was that it's very easy to become a somewhat decent-sized big fish in a very small pond. See, when you get out into the world, you realize that what you've done isn't as impressive as you thought it once was. For example, if you make 100k a year in Ireland, you're like in the top 6.5% of people. You're doing pretty damn good. And if you do that when you're in your 20s, when you're 21, 22, well, now you're in like the top 1% of people your age. So you can either keep doing that, and see, the problem with that for me was I started to feel like I didn't need to make much more, right? Like, I felt complacent. I felt like I am literally in the top 1% here. I'm set, I'm good. And there's this quote from Matthew McConaughey that sums this up really nicely. I'm going to butcher the quote, but he says, sometimes you need to get less impressed and more involved. So that's exactly what I needed. I needed to be less impressed with how much I was making by going somewhere else, right, where there's other people making way more than me, and then being more involved in learning how do I actually make more. Not just more money, right? It's not just the money here. It's about the impact, and it's about the vision of doing more and building better. That's another reason why I left, and it's another reason why I think getting out of your hometown is so massively important. Let's say you're in a small town right now in Ireland. You go from that small town to some place like Dubai, right? When you look out your window and you see all these big buildings behind you, right? You realize it's a big damn world, and you'll feel pretty small, and that's good. And look, at the end of the day, you can always come back. Just because you leave your hometown or you leave your home country doesn't mean that you can never return. In fact, so many people leave when they're 20 and return when they're 30, when they're 35. You know, one of my uncles specifically, he left our hometown pretty young in his 20s, and he returned somewhere in his 30s. And he's a really fucking interesting guy. Like, he has so many stories to tell. He's been in Mexico, he's been in London, he's been in like all the places. And when I have conversations with him versus, let's just say, one of my uncles or aunties that never really left, I'm more interested by him. It seems like a richer life. So that's why I think you should potentially consider it too.